I was thinking you don't hear the expression my spare time anymore. You never hear anybody say, well, in my spare time, I've constructed a doghouse, or, I baked a cake, or I, walked 5 miles. There's no such, people don't have spare time. Well, you know what? When you retire, you get a lot of spare time. And you have to create your life in a different way than you have to create your life when you know a child. First you go to school and then you're socialized. That's your life. You go to school at 7:30 in the morning or 8 o'clock in the morning, and you're there till 3 or maybe 5, and that's your life. And you sort of get into this pattern of that's my life, and then you get a job and the same thing, 8 or 9 until 5 or 10, and then you're retired. And people have a lot of problems with that. It's actually a very good time to become enlightened because you have time. You have spare time. You have time to spare. At the same time as the clock is ticking, clock is ticking. I was watching a short the other day. I love shorts, by the way. I watched Brian Cox, who is the cosmic guy. I just love his stuff. And I mean, he should be in a band, or should have been. Apparently, he was. Anyway, it was Jim Carrey, the actor, comedian, and now artist, painter. And what he was making a speech, I guess, or a talk over at Eckhart Tolle, the guy who wrote The Power of Now and a bunch of other things. And he's out there. He must be out there like 20 years now, talking about the power of now, that our issues, all our life issues come from that we're either thinking about the future, or we're worried about the past, or we're thinking about the past and worried about the future. And actually, there's a lot of philosophers out there and self-help people. Sadhguru also says that the great problem of humans is that we have memory and we have imagination. I woke up this morning and I was having some issues with memory. I didn't know what the memories were, but I knew I was having issues because I was like, what? I don't feel like getting out of bed. So I did what's called EMDR, eye movement desensitization. I wrote recovery. I don't know. EMDR, you can look it up. And it works. I just use a pen and I do that. It's an eye movement thing, which it breaks whatever you want to do. It does that. And I thought that I had to just, there's something was going on in the background that was distracting me. And I thought, this is Sundays. And for some reason, I'm always a little challenged on a Sunday. I don't know if it's because my parents were divorced and on Sunday was the changeover day. This would be a memory, which I'm not aware of. I'm telling you now, but when I why would I find problem, or I really think that's kind of it. That was the changeover day, whether usually we were visiting my father, and that's the day we went back to my mother. And it isn't that I favored either home, because I didn't. I couldn't wait to get out. But because of the change and because of the lack of control. And even, I was like 13, 14, 15 years old. At 15, I was like, no more. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going for weekends. I got a life. I got friends. I got things to do. I got a boyfriend with a car, So Jim Carrey was making a speech about what happened to him the day he had enlightenment, the day he was enlightened. And describing that experience was very difficult. And what he said was, essentially it's a feeling of being at one with the universe, not the earth, but with the universe, just being at one. And that he had played a lot of roles in his life. He had the acting role and all the roles he created in movies, but also the roles he created in his own life. And I was thinking my roles, the good daughter role. Actually, it was the bad daughter role because my brother, he was the good boy. He was the good son. And I could see I wasn't getting there. I wasn't getting there. I did not understand the demands that were made on me. They seemed to me to be cruel and just not what I wanted to do. And the demand, because remember, I'm in my 80s, so I grew up I was a little girl in the 1940s, but I came of age in the 1950s when we still wore gloves. We wore white gloves. Women wore gloves when we went out. If we went to lunch, we wore gloves. We went to dinner, we wore gloves. Um, and I had a beautiful collection of gloves, actually. And when women my age, girls my age at 14, started wearing tennis shoes, my mother and other mothers were appalled. Like, oh, your feet. Oh my God, you're going to flat feet. And then the big style for girls my age to say that we were rebellious was to wear Levi's, and they were only made for men. They did not have jeans for women. They were made for men. And our father's white dress shirts loose over the jeans, and that was the look. And you also had to cuff your jeans. That was the look with tennies, and it was like, that was the first transgender look. Girls dressing like boys, wearing boys' clothing. That was a statement of rebellion that we were not going to be good girls. But the big threat of not being a good girl was that no decent man would ever marry you. So, roles that I've had, those are roles that I've had. Good girl, bad girl, independent girl, a girl who wanted to get married and did. I had a marriage when I was 18. It was annulled when I was 19. Because what were we doing? What were we doing? What was he doing? What were I doing? We were fulfilling a role. And he was a bright young man. I think he'd gone to Dartmouth, as I recall. He was a little older. He was 3 years older. And I just turned 18. And he was like 21. And he wanted to be a writer, and eventually he did. He became a journalist, actually. And I wanted to be a writer, kind of, but it wasn't something, the careers for a woman where you could be a teacher, you could be a secretary, or you could be a wife, a homemaker. You could be a homemaker. There were magazines for Ladies' Home Journal. It wasn't the Men's Home Journal, and it wasn't just the Home Journal. It was the Ladies' Home Journal. So I was stuck in that for quite a while. I was very fortunate because I was so rebellious. I wound up in Greenwich Village, surrounded by artists and other rebelling people. In fact, that was the most liberating thing. I left my mother's house after the annulment, and I went to Greenwich Village one night. And the reasons I was going is because I had a crazy boyfriend who had been stalking me, and my parents couldn't protect me, and the police couldn't protect me. When I said, "Yeah, let's go," they say, "Oh, he just loves you." Mm-hmm. And I went to Greenwich Village, and I remember just coming up out of the subway station on 6th Avenue and walking a few blocks to McDougal Street, and we were shoulder to shoulder kids who were like 18, 19, 20, 21 years of age, who had all left home, shoulder to shoulder. And apparently the same thing was going on in San Francisco. So we had a whole generation of kids who didn't want to be part of the silent generation. That was the 50s, the man in the gray flannel suit. That was another role. These were all roles. And, I played the role of the writer. Oh my God, I can't come to the... Procrastination is part of being a writer, and I love that part. I also love the hanging out, drinking coffee, talking to other writers, reading their writing, being other artists and musicians. And, I was a waitress, and it was not cheap to live in Greenwich Village in New York in the 1960s, but it was certainly manageable. If you made $400 a month, whether you worked in an office or I was as a waitress, I made more, quite frankly. I made more. I had tips. And we had tourists. We had tourists and we had tips. You could manage very nicely in New York. And then I realized that I needed to really make some money. Things you could just see, I was getting older. I was like 24, 25. I'd been there for years. And I just decided, okay, I had won a big prize as a playwright. And a friend of mine who was leading a conventional life, although she was quite unconventional, she was a lawyer, and she introduced me to a director, a movie director who read one of my scripts and said, "Oh, I really like your writing. I'd like to option your script." And on that option money, I moved to Hollywood. And for a while, you see, I was in that role. New York award-winning playwright. That was another role. And that role got me some jobs. But I have to tell you that after 2 years, because after 2 years that wore off. It was like, oh, she's just another Hollywood writer. But I will say this about Hollywood. They're very much into money, of course. It's a business. It's called show business. Business is a big word. But they're very in awe of actual artists, of actual creative people like playwrights, until you just become one of them. And that's what happened to me. And that was another role, a Hollywood writer, TV writer. And I wrote for Norman Lear's company, and that was at that time a wonderful company. They'd all in the family. And for other people. And then I just could see that it was a miracle I was getting jobs at all, because I'm a woman. And the industry was dominated by men, and it still is, by white men. There's been a lot of progress over the last few years, the last 20 years, I would think, last 15 years more. But we had to fight for that, and we did fight for that. And I'm glad that's happening. I'm way out of that, because the other thing about it's a very sexist business. You don't see a lot of Meryl Streep movies, do you? You don't really see a lot of Julia Roberts movies anymore either. And you don't have a lot of writers over the age of 40. There's a lot of reasons for that. Partly, you also don't have a lot of development people over there, because they think they are always looking for material for the audience, and the audience is considered to be young, which is why you see a lot of cartoons. So these were all roles, and now I'm in the, and then I was in the role of the single woman. I had basically 3 large relationships in my life with men, and they all ended. Either they broke off or they all broke off. And the last one was 30 years ago. I'm going to be 85 quite soon. And that was when I just realized I just didn't have the energy anymore. That's another role that a lot of people fall into, with both men and women, the role of helper. And that's a very well approved of role for particularly for women, and a man's role as well as a helper, because he's still, well, they do make more money than women most of the time. And so the man is the provider. He's still the provider, even though women are providing like crazy. And there's still that notion, I see it in my single friends, well, not all of them, where they do kind of think if they had a husband that their life would be a little bit more fulfilling. So I'm actually watching a friend go through unlearning that right now, and she's always had a husband and has children and grandchildren now. So roles, giving up your roles, just being, not that easy. I take care of a dog now, that's what I do. That's my role. I take care of a dog. I take care of me, I take care of a house, and I have a lot of time, and occasionally I know what Jim Carrey is talking about. Occasionally I feel enlightened, and that moment is generally brief, frankly. I'm always trying to recapture it. And Carrey said the same thing, that ever since he had that moment of enlightenment, he's been trying to get back to it. Because enlightenment doesn't last the way, breakfast doesn't last. You need to have another meal, later in the day. It doesn't last. But once you do experience it, once you've known that, and I could say that sometimes it feels like falling in love, that moment of where oh, that oh moment. I think it's worth allowing yourself enough space and letting go of roles and expectations to be there, because we are on a planet rolling through the universe, I think 1,600 kilometers a minute or 1,100 miles a minute in a expanding universe. And we are, if it's known at all, apparently the only cognizant creatures in the entire universe. And if that doesn't let you have enlightenment, I don't know what will.